Hi. When I tell people I'm an only child, they often look at me sadly and say, "Oh, you must have been so lonely." I found that strange because, honestly, I don't remember being that lonely. And no, it wasn't because I had an imaginary friend. I'm not that imaginative. I'd like to think I had something better. I had myself. She's my best friend and still is my most faithful companion. We have great conversations, and she thinks I'm really funny. I grew up staring at my reflection, you see. Now, before you think that I'm a narcissist, let me explain why. There was a mirror in front of my desk. My father was an engineer and he was very practical. He wanted to create more light for my workspace. So he put a mirror at the end of my desk so that it would reflect more light from the lamp. Of course, I just ended up staring at my reflection a lot. And once I got comfortable with someone always looking at me, I ended up talking to her, telling her about my day, sharing some jokes. Her constant companionship ended up comforting me. And little did I realize I was honing a survival skill. First of all, talking to yourself is not that uncommon. We do it more often than we realize because it's so unconscious. But did you know that self-talk, if done deliberately, with carefully chosen words, can change the way you see yourself and even improve your performance? Your mind is incredibly powerful. It can push your body to do things that you didn't know were possible. This is clearly seen in sports because it's something measurable. We've all heard, for example, how tennis is a mental game. And this is because even if you're not feeling 100% physically, you can still win by outthinking your opponents. Experts say that mental toughness between points is critical because it helps players process the last point and prepare for the next. Understanding your previous errors and letting them go will help you focus on the next point and reduce mental errors and improve consistency. Conversely, focusing on the previous error to the extent that you can't strategize on the next point will throw you off your game. We've all seen players who were ahead and then one mistake throws them off track and it ends up costing them the game. But if you're not an athlete, I'm a lawyer, how can self-talk help you? Let me share a story of how it helped me. This is about my childhood. Superficially, it was pretty unexceptional. It's the story of a model minority immigrant. I was born in Shanghai and moved to LA when I was 6. I learned English as a second language and got good enough that by the time I was 10, I was invited to skip 2 grades. I picked up piano when I was in junior high and played well enough that I was accepted to an arts high school. I'm a good standardized test taker, so I got into a good college, which led me to a good law school and launched me into this exciting legal career. Early in our relationship, my husband said to me, "Who's that super competitive character from the Joy-Luck Club?" Waverly. Right, you're Waverly. But I didn't think I'd make it this far. For years, starting when I was 8, I had fantasies of suicide. I went to the library, because this is before the internet, and researched how famous people killed themselves to get ideas. But why was I so miserable, and how did I survive? Let me step back and add a little more color to my childhood. Both my parents is super smart, but my father had a chip on his shoulder and he felt that he never had the right opportunities to realize his full potential. He didn't want that to happen to me and was particularly keen to make sure I was successful so that he could show the world What a genius he truly was. To secure my future success, he believed that I could never make a mistake. He alternately praised me for my achievements and punished me for any missteps. The punishment wasn't just verbal. It was mostly physical. In my generation and in my parents' culture, corporal punishment was standard practice. But there's the occasional spanking, and then there's the kind of beatings that I received. It started when I was just 3 and continued through high school. I would be beaten for all sorts of slights, real or imagined. Not eating my dinner fast enough, looking at him too defiantly, getting a 99 out of 100 on a math quiz, or not being ranked number 1 in my class, even though I explained that there were no such thing as class rankings. Sadly, child abuse is still a significant issue. 60% of adults in the US have experienced at least one adverse childhood event, and 16% have experienced 4 or more. Long-term consequences of child abuse vary widely from low self-esteem, attention disorders, and poor peer relations to severe brain damage, substance abuse, and addiction. Results from a long-term study following abused children up to the age of 24 showed that physical abuse during the first 5 years of life predicts subsequent substance use later in life. In 1998, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente conducted the Adverse Childhood Experience, or ACE, study, one of the largest investigations of childhood abuse and neglect and household challenges and later life health and well-being. Data from over 17,000 patients in the ACE study indicate that a child who experiences 4 or more traumatic events is 5 times more likely to become an alcoholic, 60% more likely to become obese, and up to 46 times more likely to become an injection drug user than the general population. This was a landmark study that shook the medical establishment. More recently, in December 2020, PBS NewsHour aired a 4-part series that examined America's childhood trauma crisis, which referred to the ACE study. Childhood trauma has also caught the attention of states to provide treatment in a systematic manner. The state of California, which has its own Surgeon General, launched an initiative to train healthcare providers in how to screen for adverse childhood experiences, and those screenings are covered under Medi-Cal, the state's insurance program. For years, I accepted the abuse because I didn't have any other alternatives. I was consumed with perfection, because that's what I was raised, that's how I was raised to be, but also racked with fear and anxiety because nothing was ever going to be good enough for my father. It all came to a head the summer I turned 12. My mother was pregnant, and my father was ecstatic because he felt that I wasn't living up to his expectations, and here was another opportunity to do it right. We went to visit some relatives, and before we got home, my father and I got into a heated argument. We were outside, and he turned to me and said, "I'm ashamed of you. You're a failure, and I give up. I'm getting a second chance with the new baby, and he's gonna obey me, and he's gonna be perfect." At almost 12, my father had concluded that I was a disappointment and was not going to amount to anything. The pregnancy didn't work out, which is why I'm still an only child. But that day changed our relationship forever. I grew increasingly withdrawn, and up until his death, I never really spoke to him again. But I had no one to turn to. We moved frequently. I went to 8 different schools between kindergarten and 12th grade. I had no long-term relationships with any of my friends or teachers, and this was before the days of social media. My relatives lived quite far from us. The only person I could turn to was my reflection in the mirror. I told myself that I wasn't worthless, and one conversation at a time shut down the negative thoughts in my head and from my father. How? I became my own coach and cheerleader. When someone would tell me that something was really hard and that I shouldn't feel bad if I didn't get it, I worked so much harder just to get it. My grandmother, who was born in 1913 and narrowly escaped getting her feet bound and had to steal money from her mother to pay for her education and lived through 3 wars, used to say, if she could manage, then I had no excuse. I repeated that to myself over and over. I told myself I couldn't give up just because there were obstacles. A challenge just meant that overcoming it to achieve the result would bring that much more satisfaction. I taught myself how to be resilient. A review of psychology literature found that self-talk emerges in the toddler years, peaks in frequency during childhood, and then gradually reduces in prominence throughout the early school years. Because self-talk evolves from external to internal as we age, children who continue to talk aloud are shamed and stigmatized. When we see someone talking to themselves, we may think, are they all there? Why is there a social stigma on talking to ourselves? There are plenty of studies on the benefits of self-talk, but for some reason, it isn't a widely accepted practice outside of competitive sports. Self-talk is one of sports psychology's central tenets. When we see athletes on the field mumbling to themselves, we never wonder, are they mentally ill? Wouldn't it be great if from a young age we're encouraged to continue to talk to ourselves and guided on how to talk to ourselves? There are 2 main categories of self-talk: instructional and motivational. Instructional is very specific and can increase focus and memory. Psychiatrist and Harvard Medical School instructor Dr. Ashnard Kani found that instructional self-talk can assist someone in retaining recall of information or facts, task management, and organization. Motivational self-talk is general encouragement, like, you can do it, come on, don't give up. It has a positive impact on your emotions, Dr. Nadkarni says, as it can serve as a coping mechanism in stress management or boost one's mood. Doesn't it make sense to apply this practice to improve people's, especially children's, emotional well-being? We should be advocating self-talk more widely, beyond just improving your free throw shot or your backhand. Imagine all the children of trauma who can avoid a life of depression, addiction, and even suicide. Let me be clear. I'm not suggesting that self-talk can replace therapy or even pharmacological drugs if they're appropriate. But it's free, proven, and immediately available for those who don't have access to any other resource. The idea I want to spread today is to promote deliberate self-talk. This intuitive, user-friendly tool. Let's teach everyone, especially educators who can teach children, how to coach ourselves to improve our physical and cognitive abilities and emotional well-being. If we can learn how to speak to ourselves with intent, we can better regulate our emotions. We can change our narrative if that self-talk turns negative. We can build self-confidence and resilience. The age of COVID further highlights the benefits of self-talk because it can reduce the feelings of isolation as a result of working from home or social distancing. So the next time you see your reflection in the mirror, don't just check for flaws. Take a moment, smile, and say hello. Thank you.